911. What's your emergency?
She's not coming up. She's under the water. He won't let her go.
Ma'am, who's under the water?
The whale is holding the trainer. Please, someone help her.
And just like that, the show ended. No curtain call, no applause, only the sound of sirens and silence. Rachel Langford had spent years building trust with Kraken, the park's star Orca, 6 tons of power wrapped in black and white. She believed in patience. She believed in the bond. But on that February afternoon, belief wasn't enough. What started as a flawless performance spiraled into a real-time nightmare as hundreds watched, frozen, while the ocean took one of its own. This isn't just a tragedy. It's a truth we keep ignoring. You can train behavior, but you can't erase instinct. And when that instinct breaks through the choreography, no whistle can stop it. Before we begin, do you think orcas like Kraken should still perform for crowds? Tell us in the comments. And if you're brave enough to keep watching, subscribe now. The truth is already in the water. Rachel Langford had never seen the ocean, but it lived inside her. While other children played with dolls or chased fireflies, Rachel sat cross-legged in her bedroom, flipping through worn encyclopedias of marine life. She could name every species of dolphin by heart, sketch orca fins from memory, and mimic the high-pitched whistles of bottlenose pods without hesitation. Her fascination wasn't fleeting. It was quiet and constant, like the tide pulling at the edges of her small Midwestern world. Her parents didn't understand it. Their town was surrounded by farmland, not salt water. But for Rachel, it was never a question of if, only when. On her 13th birthday, that when finally arrived. They drove for 2 days straight, crossing state lines until the sun shimmered against the tanks of OceanRealm, a sprawling marine park along the California coast. There, she saw her first orca. Massive, smooth, black and white like ancient poetry. She didn't scream with joy. She didn't even blink. She just stared, eyes wide, breath held. Something shifted in that moment. A quiet promise was made. She wouldn't just visit the ocean. She would live in its shadows, speak its language, and someday stand in the water beside giants. Even then, she didn't dream of fame, only of belonging. And the ocean, it seemed, had whispered back. Rachel didn't arrive at OceanRealm as a trainer. She came with a mop in one hand and dreams in the other. At 18, she took the only job available, sanitation staff, and spent her days scrubbing salt residue from glass panels, collecting fish guts, and watching the shows from behind the barriers. But while others cleaned and left, Rachel stayed. She observed. She took notes. She memorized hand signals, feeding schedules, and trainer routines. She listened not just to the commands, but to the silences between them. The language of trust whispered between human and whale. It wasn't long before the senior staff noticed. She was promoted to assistant animal care technician, then apprentice trainer, and within a few short years, she stood beside orcas, holding the whistle she had once only dreamed of. But Rachel's strength wasn't in performance, it was in presence. She didn't treat the whales like props in a show. She treated them like old souls with stories etched into their skin. Her specialty became behavioral enrichment, designing challenges, puzzles, and activities that stimulated the whales' minds. She formed close bonds with dolphins, belugas, and eventually, the most unpredictable of them all, Kraken. While others approached him with caution, Rachel approached with compassion. She believed even the broken could be reached. Even the wild could learn to trust. It was that belief, gentle and unwhacked, that would define her legacy. And one day, cost her everything. Kraken was born into the wild, beneath a sky of northern lights and a sea that pulsed with ancient rhythms. For the first 2 years of his life, he swam alongside his pod in the frigid waters off Norway's coast, learning the language of the deep, the clicks, the calls, the songs passed down through generations. Then the nets came. One moment, he was chasing herring through a silver blur of bubbles. The next, he was alone, dragged from the water, torn from his mother's side, and lowered into a concrete box. They called it Captivity. For Kraken, it was a silent collapse of everything he had ever known. Transferred from facility to facility, he was measured, branded, renamed, and displayed. He learned commands, but never trust. He performed tricks, but never forgot. At OceanRealm, trainers were warned. Kraken had a past. There were reports. A trainer who fell into his tank years earlier had never resurfaced. The death was labeled an accident. No one spoke of it again. Still, the legend followed him like a shadow. Some whales adapted to tanks. Kraken didn't. He often floated alone, his movements slow and deliberate. He ignored cues, rejected food, and refused to perform on command. But Rachel believed he wasn't dangerous, just misunderstood. Where others saw threat, she saw trauma. She thought if anyone could reach him, it was her. What she didn't know, what no one dared to say, was that Kraken hadn't forgotten the cold, and he had never stopped listening to it. February 16th dawned like any other. Clear skies, still water, and the hum of anticipation in the air. It was a Sunday matinee, the kind that drew families in droves. Tourists sipped sodas, children clutched plush Orca toys, and the stadium at OceanRealm buzzed with chatter. Behind the curtain, Rachel Langford stood in her wetsuit, calm, focused, routine. She had done this performance dozens of times. Kraken had been rehearsing well that week, responsive, cooperative, even playful. Staff noted it with cautious optimism, but Rachel smiled. She believed the trust they had built was finally taking root. The show began like clockwork. Lights shimmered across the surface of the pool, music played through hidden speakers, and the crowd leaned forward in excitement. Kraken breached on cue, spraying a wave of salt water onto the front rows. Laughter followed. Rachel raised her arm in a fluid motion, the signal for spin. Kraken obeyed. Perfectly. They moved together in near silence, their language invisible to the audience but rich with meaning. Rachel gave the nod for the finale, a dramatic side-by-side dive, followed by a synchronized breach. She stepped closer to the edge, reaching out, poised for the final gesture. And then it happened. In a blink, the air changed. Kraken pivoted, silent and swift. His jaws closed around the base of her ponytail, not harsh, but firm. For a fraction of a second, it looked almost gentle. Then he pulled. The water swallowed her before the audience could process what they had seen. Gasps erupted. Some clapped, thinking it was part of the act. Others froze, uncertain. But Rachel didn't surface, and Kraken didn't let go. What began as a celebration of wonder had just crossed an invisible line, and the sea was about to speak louder than it ever had before. The first screams didn't come from the trainers. They came from a child in the third row, pointing as the water turned violent, white foam erupting where serenity had just been. Rachel Langford had vanished beneath the surface, and Kraken was thrashing with unnatural speed, his massive body coiling in the tank like a storm confined to glass. At first, many thought it was a stunt, a breathtaking finale, a dramatic dive. But seconds passed, then a minute, and Rachel did not return. Panic spread like wildfire. Parents shielded their children's eyes. Others began recording, unsure of what they were witnessing. What they were witnessing was a killing. Kraken refused every signal. Trainers blew emergency whistles, slapped the water, tossed fish in desperate attempts to distract him. But nothing broke his focus. He gripped Rachel's body with terrifying precision, dragging her deeper, spinning her violently, then letting her float just long enough to gasp before pulling her under again. The stadium filled with chaos. The music cut off mid-note. Emergency lights flashed red. Sirens wailed, echoing off the concrete like warning bells from another world. Behind the scenes, staff scrambled into crisis mode. They'd trained for this. Code Black, Orca aggression, trainer submerged. But drills couldn't prepare them for the sight of Kraken breaching with Rachel's limp form trailing beside him, arms outstretched, hair splayed, wetsuit torn. He wasn't performing. He was holding on. Every second stretched into eternity. Nets were deployed, divers readied to intervene, only to retreat when Kraken circled back with deadly intent. Trainers shouted his name, used every cue, every lure, every ounce of hope. But it was useless. He wouldn't release her. Not because he didn't understand, but because, maybe for the first time, he didn't care. 30 minutes passed before Kraken was lured into the isolation pool. Only then could they recover what remained of Rachel. She was unrecognizable. The autopsy would later describe massive blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, severe internal injuries, and signs of drowning. But no report could capture what it felt like in that moment. To see a woman so deeply devoted to the sea be taken by it in front of hundreds of helpless witnesses. OceanRealm went silent, not just for the rest of the day, but in a way that would ripple across years. The audience left in stunned silence. The seats emptied, the laughter ended, the illusion shattered. And Kraken, he floated alone in the center of the pool, unmoving, as if nothing had happened, as if perhaps something long suppressed had finally surfaced. And now, the silence could return. The stadium emptied in a hush, like a funeral procession without a casket. No final announcements, no apologies. Only the faint buzz of radios, the dull echo of dripping water, and a single stretcher wheeled toward the exit, its burden covered in a soaked white sheet. OceanRealm shut down within the hour, turnstiles locked, staff dismissed. Media vans circled the gates like vultures sensing blood. The headlines came fast and unrelenting. Trainer killed by killer whale. Orca turns violent during live show. But for those who had been there, no headline could capture the horror of that day. They hadn't seen a performance gone wrong. They'd seen reality break through spectacle. The illusion, the idea that nature could be choreographed, that danger could be softened with routine, had died in the same tank Rachel had. For years, guests had clapped at every splash, believed every smile. They thought the trainers were in control. That trust could tame instinct. But Kraken had reminded them, violently, that wildness can't be domesticated, only deferred. The investigation began immediately. Authorities combed through footage, statements, and internal records. What they found was damning. Reports of past aggression, warnings from staff, behavioral red flags swept aside for the sake of profit. Rachel's name trended globally, but she wasn't a celebrity now. She was a symbol, not of recklessness, but of devotion. of a woman who believed in connection so deeply, she entered the water one more time and never came back. And in that silence, a new question was born. If the sea could not be controlled, why had we ever believed it could? For a moment, it seemed the world had stopped. The waves outside OceanRealm rolled on, indifferent, but inside, nothing moved. Trainers stood in shock. Executives whispered behind closed doors. And Kraken floated alone, the water around him eerily still. But silence never lasts long. Within days, protests ignited beyond the gates. Candles, signs, and flowers piled up beneath the welcome sign where Rachel had once smiled in uniform. Voices rose. Justice for Rachel. Free Kraken. Two opposing cries, tangled in the same grief. Animal rights groups seized the moment. They had warned of this, again and again. And now, the cost had a name, a face, a legacy soaked in seawater and blood. Journalists unearthed old memos, employee reports, safety concerns buried under years of show schedules and ticket sales. OceanRealm released a statement. Polished, sympathetic, empty. They called it a tragedy. They did not call it preventable. Behind the scenes, trainers were told to remain silent. No interviews, no comments. But some spoke anyway, anonymously, confirming what many feared. Kraken had shown signs for months. He wasn't ready. He never would be. Rachel's family stepped forward, not with anger, but with purpose. They demanded accountability, not only for her, but for every trainer asked to trust a predator for the sake of applause. And slowly, the conversation shifted. This wasn't just about one death. It was about an entire system built on denial. The tank wasn't the only thing cracking. So was the illusion it had held for decades. Kraken never performed again. After Rachel's death, he was transferred to an off-exhibit tank. No music, no lights, no crowds. Just the quiet echo of water and the distant hum of pumps. To some, it was punishment. To others, mercy. But either way, it was silence. OceanRealm didn't recover. Attendance dropped. Sponsors pulled funding. School groups canceled trips that had once been tradition. The park's reputation, once built on wonder, now carried the shadow of blood. But beyond the gates, something larger had begun to shift. New federal safety mandates were introduced. Trainers were barred from entering tanks during live performances. The National Wildlife Safety Agency launched sweeping audits across marine parks nationwide. For the first time, questions drowned out applause. Documentaries followed. The most piercing of them, Deep Truth, used Rachel's story as a central warning. Her image, once framed by ocean spray and stage lights, was now a symbol, not of failure, but of sacrifice. Of a woman who loved the sea so deeply, she forgot it could still hurt her. Public perception changed. No longer did orcas seem like playful performers. They were wild, intelligent, and captive. And that truth could no longer be hidden beneath choreography. Rachel Langford didn't set out to start a movement. She just wanted to belong. But in the end, it was her loss, not her voice, that echoed loudest. And the world finally listened. Rachel Langford didn't die chasing fame. She died believing in something bigger than herself, that trust could be earned, that wildness could be understood, that maybe, just maybe, love was enough. But the ocean doesn't bend to belief. It doesn't care how many years you've trained, how much you love, or how gently you speak. It remembers what we forget. that behind every trick is instinct, and behind every applause, a risk. Kraken wasn't a monster. Rachel wasn't naive. They were both captives of a system that sold wonder without warning. Now, all that remains is silence, and the question that silence leaves behind. What is the cost of taming the untamable? If this story moved you, if it made you think about the world behind the glass, then speak up, share it. Remember Rachel's name, not just as a tragedy, but as a turning point. Let us know in the comments. Do you think animals like Kraken should still be kept in captivity? Was this preventable? Who do you think is truly responsible? And if you want more real stories that challenge what we think we know, subscribe. The truth is rarely quiet, and sometimes it surfaces where we least expect it.